Here we are back again with another POD video. So today what we're going to do is I'm just going to focus solely on the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. So just to get to it right away, the first one is the freedom of speech. Now, we don't really need to talk too much about freedom of speech because we talked about constitutional rights in school in class yesterday. But anyways, essentially what freedom of speech, what it means and what it boils down to is we can say what is on our mind. So we can do that in public or in private. Um, Generally speaking, without fear of punishment. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't just go and, threaten somebody and use libelous and slanderous words. But generally speaking, we can't be censored by the government just because we don't like what they are doing. We have that ability. And I have this chart here. Kind of talking about speech, and freedom of speech is really narrowed down into two different categories. You have written speech and you have unwritten speech. So, written speech is what we do, what we say, what we put on Facebook, Twitter, social media, that kind of stuff. And even though those companies, they are able to, I guess you could say, limit speech however they want to, um, really the Constitution boils down to whether or not it's going to be something that is slander or libelous. Then unwritten, that's an example of the Tinker versus the One case that we talked about in class yesterday, where they weren't actually speaking out against the Vietnam War, but they were wearing an armband. So that's going to be the difference there. The second part is going to be freedom of religion. And what that means is it prohibits Congress from establishing an official religion. And that today is going to be known as the Establishment Clause. And what that does is it guarantees Americans the right to practice their faith as they wish. The government cannot favor one religion over the other, and essentially makes it to where you are going to be able to have any religion you want. No religion, you can go ahead and create a religion if you want to. Um, and that's going to be known as that establishment clause. And the reason I put the picture over here on the right, this is Thomas Jefferson's, this is his gravestone, which is kind of surprising. On it, he says he was buried, Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, of the Statute for Religious Freedom, and the father of the University of Virginia. So even though he was president and vice president, didn't want that to be put on his gravestone. But the big thing really is this statute of religious freedom, and that separation of church and state is going to be credited to Thomas Jefferson. The next one we have is freedom of the press. So what that does is it allows Americans to express themselves in print. Now that was the original meaning. Back then, you had books, newspapers, magazines. People like Ben Franklin, they had their own editorials. They had their own opinions that they were able to put out in the newspapers, whether it was a positive or a negative thing. You have the ability. The press has the ability to print that type of thing. Now, today, it's radio, TV, social media, that kind of stuff, but the freedom of the press still goes today. Our press has the ability to express themselves. The government, they cannot practice censorship because they contain alarming or offensive ideas. Just because it makes them look bad, they can't stop you from printing it. But that's going to be freedom of the press. We also have the next part, freedom of assembly. So, what freedom of assembly, what that does is it protects our rights to gather in groups for any reason, so long as the assemblies are peaceful. And I can't stress it enough. Assemblies must be peaceful or they do violate the Constitution. So what examples of those are political rallies, parades, public celebrations. Those types of things count as freedom to assemble. And we talked about this in class the other day with the Westboro Baptist Church protesting at military funerals. Now, the way the Supreme Court had it set up was that those are legal because they are not there trying to cause a fight. They are not using fighting words. They are not doing anything that would cause alarm to the Supreme Court. Now, again, a lot of people, many of you are going to disagree with that fact because they are protesting at things that are there's no other way to say it, are very controversial, something that really shouldn't be protested. But that's going to be an example of the right to assemble. And I always use this phrase, but just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's unconstitutional. But that freedom to assemble, I mean, that extends to many groups. Another example was that there was a group of people who wanted to march, and this was in the 1940s. They were anti-Nazi party. Because they were the anti-Nazi parties were given the right to assemble, well, that meant that the government also must allow a protest of people who support Nazis. So again, things that are controversial, but nonetheless has to be given the same freedom. And then the last one, we have a freedom of petition. And really, what a petition is, it's a formal request to change. Now, you can express your ideas to the government this way. You can suggest something new. The examples I have on here is like suggesting a skating park in your community. In 2018, North Dakota Measure 2, they were attempting to legalize marijuana in this state. That started through a petition. The prohibition of alcohol, the 18th Amendment, that also started in that category of the petition. But basically, the freedom to petition just means that you have the ability to try and change the government the way that you want it. And it's good because it gives us more democracy. You have to still have people that are going to be voting on it, and make sure it passes that way. But overall, those are going to be the five freedoms in the First Amendment.